I stood frozen, clutching the pie I'd baked with shaking hands, as my daughter-in-law's words cut through the laughter like glass. Granny doesn't deserve a seat at the table. The candles flickered, the chairs were all filled, and my son only looked away. After selling my wedding ring to cover his rent, after decades of birthdays and scraped knees and sacrifices, on Thanksgiving, I was told I didn't belong. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The wind bit through Evelyn Carter's wool coat as she stepped up to the pristine stone steps of her son's home, arms wrapped tightly around a foil-covered pie dish. The scent of spiced apples still lingered from the oven, rising through the thin aluminum. Her hands, veined and knotted from years of sewing and lifting toddlers who grew into strangers, trembled slightly. Not from the cold, but from something deeper, older. Jason and Madison's house stood like a magazine spread, polished, sterile, and too clean to feel lived in. A trio of pumpkins lined the porch, matching the burgundy door wreath. Not one out of place, not one real. She knocked once. Then, because it felt like something a guest would do, she let herself in. Inside, the warmth was immediate, almost oppressive. Laughter spilled from the dining room like spilled wine, forced, loud, the kind of laughter people use to drown out discomfort. Evelyn moved cautiously past the foyer mirror, where she caught a glimpse of herself. Gray curls tucked beneath a modest hat. Lips pressed thin, shoulders squared. She'd worn her best navy blouse, the one with tiny white buttons she'd re-sewn herself just last week. The pie, still warm, balanced in her arms like a peace offering. Madison saw her first. "Oh," she said, raising a single eyebrow. "You actually came." Evelyn smiled gently, unwilling to bite. "I brought the pie Jason always loved." Madison's eyes flicked to the dish. How quaint. Before Evelyn could respond, Jason appeared behind his wife. His smile was quick, rehearsed. "Hey, Ma." He leaned in, kissed the air beside her cheek. No hug, no warmth. Not like when he was little and used to race to her at the school gate, his backpack bouncing behind him. "You're just in time," Madison said, turning her back. "Dinner's starting." Evelyn followed them into the dining room. The table stretched longer than she remembered. Candles flickered in golden holders. Linen napkins folded like origami swans, wine glasses perfectly aligned. 8 chairs surrounded the table, each neatly arranged, each taken. She blinked. "Where should I?" she began. "Oh." Madison glanced over her shoulder, then smiled. "We didn't think you'd make it, so..." She gestured vaguely. "We didn't really plan for... extra." Jason chuckled, eyes darting to the others around the table. No one met Evelyn's gaze. His sister Beth shifted uncomfortably. Cousin Mark cleared his throat and reached for the sweet potatoes. "But I made..." "It's fine," Madison said brightly. "You can just grab a plate from the kitchen. There's plenty of counter space." Evelyn stood perfectly still. Her arms tightened around the pie, as if it were something alive, something worth protecting. The silence in the room was sharp enough to cut through bone. She looked at Jason. "Jace." Her voice was soft, fragile. He gave a helpless half-smile. "It's not a big deal, Ma." And that was the worst of it. The dismissal. The ease with which he tossed her dignity aside like a jacket he didn't feel like wearing. "I'll just set this down then," Evelyn whispered. She turned and placed the pie on a crowded sideboard between imported rolls and cranberry sauce served in a designer bowl. No one moved to make room. A moment later, Evelyn stepped back from the table. "I'll let y'all enjoy," she said, her voice steady despite the crack in her ribs that only she could feel. She didn't wait for a reply. The foyer was still warm, the door still open from some earlier arrival. The wind had calmed, but Evelyn pulled her coat tighter anyway. She descended the steps slowly, holding onto the railing like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth. The laughter returned behind her. Louder now, like waves crashing just to prove the tide would never wait. She reached her car and sat behind the wheel, staring at the wheel with hollow eyes. Her breath fogged the glass as she stared out at the house she once helped pay for with babysitting money, second jobs, and sacrifices Jason never even noticed. Inside her, something calcified. A silence, not born of submission, but strategy. Her hands no longer trembled. She exhaled once, deep and cold, and placed her palms firmly on the steering wheel. Next year, she thought, there will be a table, and it will be mine. Evelyn's house greeted her in silence. The porch light, yellowed and flickering, cast a lonely glow on the chipped wooden steps as she climbed them. Her front door stuck the way it always had, swelling in damp weather, never quite square in the frame. She gave it the usual nudge with her shoulder, stepped inside, and was swallowed by the familiar quiet. The air held a hint of cinnamon from earlier that morning. Her kitchen table still wore its holiday placemats, bright orange with tiny stitched leaves, set for one, though she had no real plan to eat here. They weren't for her. They were tradition. She placed her purse on the counter, then stopped. Her arms, empty now, still held the memory of the pie she'd carried like a peace flag into war. She glanced down, as if expecting to still see it there, but the dish, like her seat at the table, was gone. From somewhere deep inside her mind, the sound returned. Madison's voice, syrupy sweet. "You can just grab a plate from the kitchen." Laughter rising behind it. Jason's chuckle threading through like static. Evelyn closed her eyes, and suddenly she was back in that dining room. 8 full chairs, 8 full plates. No room for the woman who had stayed up nights hemming Jason's first slacks for college interviews, who sold her wedding ring when he needed money for his first apartment, who said yes to every favor and need and babysitting weekend without ever being asked if she needed anything in return. Her hands found the edge of the kitchen sink. She gripped it until her knuckles paled. There was a knock. She didn't move. The knock came again, gentler this time. "Evelyn?" "It's Helen." Evelyn inhaled slowly, blinked once, then let go of the sink. She opened the door. Helen stood there in her puffer vest and thick scarf, cheeks pink from the cold. Her hands held a small foil-wrapped plate. "I made too much cornbread," she said softly. "You know how I get carried away." Evelyn stepped aside to let her in. Helen placed the plate down, but her eyes stayed on Evelyn. "Everything okay?" Evelyn pulled out a chair and sat, smoothing a wrinkle in her skirt that wasn't there. "It was fine," she said. "Very pretty, very organized." Helen sat too. And? And not for me." Helen didn't ask for more. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached across the table and placed her hand over Evelyn's. It was warm, firm, without pity. Evelyn wanted to say something sharp or light, or just nothing at all, but the lump in her throat was stubborn. She cleared it and forced a smile. "It's silly, just a dinner." Helen didn't argue. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that only old friends know how to share. After Helen left, Evelyn lingered in the doorway a long time, watching the taillights disappear. Then she locked the door, drew the curtains, and moved through the house like a ghost retracing her own steps. Her fingers paused on a photograph tucked into the edge of a hallway mirror. Jason at 10, holding up a science fair ribbon, grinning like he had the world at his feet. Evelyn's handwriting on the back still read, "So proud of you, my boy. Always." She placed the photo face down. In the spare bedroom, the closet door creaked open on hinges that needed oiling. She crouched down, brushing aside boxes of holiday lights and old VHS tapes, until she found the cabinet she hadn't touched in years, the one with the metal handle that always stuck. It took 2 firm pulls to get it open. Inside, she rifled through folders, bills, pension statements, recipes clipped from magazines. And then, wedged between an old phone book and a church fundraiser envelope, she found it. A navy blue folder labeled in her own looping handwriting. Community Center, Contacts and Events. She held it in her lap like something sacred. Her fingers traced the corner. The air felt heavier now, not sad, charged. She opened the folder. Inside, lists, notes, names, the number for Mr. Collins, a rental schedule, slightly yellowed but legible, and beneath it, a sticky note with a quote she didn't remember writing. "If there's no seat at the table, build a new table." Evelyn stared at it, not smiling, not crying, just still. Then, slowly, she stood, folder in hand, and walked back into the kitchen. Tomorrow, she would make a call. The morning air carried a quiet bite, the kind that hinted snow wasn't far off. Evelyn stood at the edge of the community center parking lot, one hand on the roof of her car, the other clutching the navy blue folder. Her breath curled in the air, visible, determined. She'd parked crooked. Not because she was careless, but because she didn't want time to second-guess herself. The community center sat low and wide like a sleeping dog. Functional, a little worn, but familiar. A mural of handprints lined the front wall near the entrance. She remembered painting Jason's there when he was 6. Yellow hand, blue outline, still visible, though faded now. Inside, the smell of coffee, pine-scented cleaner, and floor wax greeted her like old coworkers. The main hallway was quiet, carpet threadbare in places. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. "Miss Carter?" The voice belonged to Mr. Collins, mid-50s, balding, beard that made up for it. He wore a faded community polo and an exhausted expression that hadn't changed since his wife left him 5 years ago. But he was decent. He remembered names. Evelyn offered a faint smile. "Hope I'm not too early." He glanced at the folder in her hands and tilted his head. "Not at all. You said you wanted to see the space?" "Yes," she said, voice calm but purposeful. "The hall." He led her down a short corridor and unlocked a double set of wooden doors with a grunt. They opened with a moan that echoed into the vast emptiness beyond. Evelyn stepped into the dining hall. It was larger than she remembered, vaulted ceiling with exposed beams, scuffed wooden floors, and a wall of windows that let in generous autumn light. Stacks of folding chairs lined the walls. A few rectangular tables stood crooked, abandoned after the last bake sale or bingo night. But she didn't see emptiness. She saw promise. "There it is," Colin said, spreading his arms like a realtor who wasn't sure the place would sell. Still standing. Evelyn walked slowly to the center of the room. Her shoes clicked softly. She spun once, taking it in. The room, the silence, the opportunity. "How many does it seat?" she asked. "150 if you pack 'em. Maybe more if folks don't mind squeezing." "I want it for Thanksgiving," she said. He blinked. "This year?" "Yes." He scratched his head. "That's 10 days out, Evelyn." She opened the folder and pulled out a check already filled out. "I want the entire day," she said. "Morning to night. No shared slots. No partial rentals." Collins looked at the check, then at her. "You expecting a crowd?" "I'm hoping for one." He hesitated. "We usually need at least 2 weeks' notice. Insurance, logistics." Evelyn said nothing. She simply met his eyes and waited. Collins sighed and took the check. "Well, guess I can shuffle some things. One of the youth groups canceled anyway." "I appreciate it." He waved her off. "I'll draw up the paperwork." As he left to get the forms, Evelyn walked to the windows at the back of the hall. Outside, a maple tree stood half bare, its crimson leaves scattered across the lawn like fire-stained confetti. She placed her palm against the glass. No one was going to push her aside this time. No more waiting for a chair to open. No more shrinking to fit into places she built. "You okay, Miss Carter?" Collins called from the doorway. She turned. "Better than yesterday." Back at the front counter, she signed the contract with steady hands. Collins handed her a copy, stapled and folded. "Good luck filling all those seats," he said. "Oh, I will," she said quietly. As she tucked the papers into her folder, something caught her eye. A bulletin board to the right of the exit. Paper-clipped notes and curling flyers, pinned in organized chaos. Lost pets, church bake sales, babysitting offers. But her eyes caught on the top corner. Lonely Hearts Dinner Exchange. Seeking holiday companionship. Dozens of handwritten notes. Veterans, widows, foster youth aging out of the system. First names and phone numbers. Descriptions like, "just one hot meal," and "would bring music if asked." She stepped closer, read each one slowly, then she began pulling slips. 1, then 3, then 5, then more. She tucked them gently into the folder with the contract. As she pushed open the door to leave, the cold wind swept in and caught the edge of her coat, but she didn't flinch. She had names now. Tomorrow, she'd start calling. Evelyn sat at her kitchen table with the navy blue folder open like a map to some place she hadn't dared imagine. The phone sat next to her cup of lukewarm tea, its keypad glowing softly in the afternoon light that filtered through her lace curtains. A yellow legal pad lay beside it, covered in names she'd copied carefully from the community center bulletin board, each one sounding more like a prayer than a person. Mrs. Darlene, widow, 78, likes gospel music. Mr. Clyde, will come if someone brings him. Penny, 15, foster home, allergic to nuts. She had no script. Just her voice, just her heart. She dialed the first number. It rang 6 times. "Hello?" The voice was fragile, tentative. "Yes. Hi, my name is Evelyn Carter. I found your note at the community center about the Thanksgiving dinner exchange." A pause. "Oh, yes. I'm putting together something real. A full dinner. Tables, music, company, not charity, just people who deserve to be seen." The silence stretched so long she nearly apologized. I don't usually go anywhere," the woman finally whispered. "That's all right," Evelyn said gently. "But there'll be a chair waiting for you if you change your mind." She thought that was the end of it. But then the woman said, "Do you need help with the stuffing?" Evelyn's throat caught. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I do." By the 5th call, Evelyn had built a rhythm. Some were cautious, some confused. Some assumed she was selling something. "You're not with a church?" "No." "A political group?" "No. Just a woman who wants to cook too much food and not eat it alone." One woman named Lillian asked if Evelyn was dying. "I'm not," she said with a chuckle. "I'm living, actually, all of a sudden." It became addictive, the sound of surprise turning to warmth, the way people slowly shifted from suspicion to anticipation. She'd circle names that said yes, underline those who offered to bring something, put stars by the ones who cried. By the end of the day, she had over 30 confirmed guests. And it wasn't even Tuesday? That night, she sat by her fireplace with the guest list spread across the coffee table, each name like a candle flickering in her mind. The room around her, once dim and echoing with old memories, now buzzed with new ones just beginning to form. She picked up the phone again, ready to call Helen with an update, but paused. Her checkbook sat on the end table. She opened it and winced. Her savings were thin, thinner than she'd admitted to herself. The rental, the groceries, the decorations she'd need, it would stretch every corner of her finances. Her pension would take a hit. No help from Jason, not a dime. For a flicker of a second, doubt slid in. Cool, rational, with the voice of her late husband telling her to be practical, Evie. But then she looked back at the list. Names, notes in shaky handwriting, people she didn't know, and somehow already loved. People who had been told, just like her, that there wasn't a seat for them either. She closed the checkbook. "We'll make it work," she whispered to the room. "We always do." She stood up, her knees stiff, her spine aching in that familiar spot. But her heart felt lighter, stronger, like something long dormant had remembered how to stand on its own again. She was halfway to turning out the light when the doorbell rang. She frowned. It was nearly 8:30. She opened the door. A young man stood there in a windbreaker, holding a small paper bag. He couldn't have been older than 20. You Evelyn Carter?" "Yes." He smiled sheepishly and handed her the bag. "My grandma, Mrs. Mendoza. You called her today? She wanted me to drop this off. Says it's her mother's molasses cookie recipe. Said she doesn't bake much anymore but thought you should have it." Evelyn blinked. "Tell her thank you," she said softly. The boy nodded and jogged off into the night. Evelyn closed the door, holding the warm bag to her chest. The list on the table was no longer a plan. It was a promise. The first cart drew attention, but it was the second one that made people stare. Evelyn wheeled both side by side through the aisles of the local supermarket, her scarf tucked tight beneath her chin, glasses sliding down her nose as she studied the printout clutched in her gloved hand. 40 pounds of potatoes, 6 bags of brown sugar, 5 frozen turkeys, bulk cranberries, butter by the case, and cans of pumpkin stacked like firewood. It wasn't holiday shopping, it was provisioning for a small army. And the town of Halberton, small enough to notice new shoes, let alone a spectacle, noticed. She caught the sideways glances in the produce section, the fake smiles by the canned goods. 2 mothers whispered by the end cap of green beans, one of them nudging the other and jerking her chin in Evelyn's direction. "She must be stocking up for the food bank," one murmured too loudly. "No, she's not with the church anymore," the other replied. "Left after that thing with her son, remember?" Evelyn didn't flinch. She simply grabbed a bag of carrots and kept moving. At checkout, the teenage clerk blinked twice when he saw the total. "You, throwing a party, ma'am?" "Just dinner," Evelyn said, sliding her card. The receipt stretched like a streamer, long enough to hang from the ceiling. She folded it once, tucked it into her coat pocket, and pushed her carts toward the exit with quiet resolve. Jason Carter was halfway through a conference call when the text came in. "Saw your mom at Trader Joe's. 2 carts. Looked like she was catering Thanksgiving." He frowned, muted the call, and texted back. "Seriously?" The reply came fast. "Like 5 turkeys. Not even joking." He stared at the screen, jaw tightening. Then he called her. Evelyn answered on the second ring, her voice calm as if she hadn't just unloaded a backseat full of perishables into her garage fridge. "Jason. Hey, Ma. Everything okay?" "Why wouldn't it be?" "Just, someone said they saw you buying out the meat section today. You hosting a football team or something?" She chuckled lightly, the sound practiced. "Oh, you know how I get. Overdo everything. Figured I'd freeze a few extra meals. The holidays can be long." He hesitated. "So, you're not planning anything weird, right?" "Weird how?" Jason fumbled. "I don't know. You've been kind of all over lately. Just making sure you're okay." "I'm just fine," Evelyn said. "Thanks for checking." Click. Jason stared at his phone. The call had ended before he could say goodbye. By the time he got home, Madison had already heard. She stood in the kitchen, scrolling furiously through her phone, mouth set in that familiar judgmental tilt. "She bought industrial-sized pie tins," she said without looking up, "and I talked to Nancy at the bakery. Evelyn special ordered 30 loaves of cornbread. Jason ran a hand down his face. She said she's freezing extra meals. For what? The apocalypse? He opened the fridge, then closed it without getting anything. I don't know. Maybe she's just bored. No, Madison said, finally locking eyes with him. She's planning something, and I think it's about us. Jason gave a tired laugh. What? You think she's plotting revenge by feeding people? Madison crossed her arms. You embarrassed her on Thanksgiving, Jason. Don't pretend like you didn't notice how she left. You think she forgot? She's not like that. Maybe she wasn't, Madison said. But people change. Jason rubbed the back of his neck. You want me to talk to her again? No, Madison said firmly. We need to find out what she's doing, before she turns this into some pity parade and makes us look like villains. Jason didn't reply, but later that night, after Madison had gone upstairs, he sat alone in the living room, the glow of his phone lighting up his face. He pulled up Evelyn's Facebook. No updates. Then her old church group page. A single post from a woman named Mrs. Bell. Heard there's a new Thanksgiving event at the community hall this year. Anyone know who's organizing it? One comment. No name. No photo. Just a real matriarch. About time. Jason stared at the screen for a long time. The town had always seen Evelyn Carter as a background character, reliable, polite, invisible when convenient. But now they watched her. At the bank, a teller who once smiled through every transaction now squinted at her stack of donation checks like she was running a scam. At the post office, a man behind her in line leaned forward and said, You catering or starting a soup kitchen, Miss Evelyn? Too casual, too rehearsed. And at the farmer's market, she could feel it. Eyes, behind crates of squash, over shoulders at the bakery stall, glances that lasted just one beat too long. You're becoming famous, Helen said, folding her arms as they stood outside Evelyn's garage one afternoon. Famous? Evelyn laughed, breath visible in the chilled air. I'd settle for useful. You're running yourself ragged, Helen said, eyeing the bags under Evelyn's eyes. You've been up since what, 5 this morning? There were volunteers dropping off dishes. 2 turkeys came in frozen solid. I had to rearrange the deep freezer. Helen raised an eyebrow. So, next year you'll just host the Macy's parade? I'll be fine, Evelyn said, waving it off. But her hands trembled slightly as she brushed flour off her jacket. Helen stepped closer, lowering her voice. People are talking, Evelyn. Some support you, but some don't. Madison's been sniffing around, asking questions. And your son hasn't exactly defended you. I don't need defending, Evelyn said softly, then added, Not anymore. Helen didn't argue, but when she left, she touched Evelyn's shoulder for just a second longer than usual. The mailbox squealed open that evening, and Evelyn pulled out the usual clutter, flyers, a coupon for roofing, a holiday sale catalog from a place she hadn't shopped at in years. And then there was the envelope. Plain white. No return address. Handwritten. Her name. Nothing else. She opened it on the porch, the dusk already closing in around her. Inside, a single strip of printer paper. Black ink. Centered. No salutation. Don't embarrass yourself further. No one wants to eat out of pity. There was no signature, just a coffee ring stain in the corner and a small tear in the fold. Evelyn stood motionless for several seconds. The sound of wind chimes from her neighbor's porch drifted over the fence. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked. She could hear the distant clatter of dishes from someone else's dinner. She read the note again. Her hands were perfectly still. Then, slowly, she folded the paper, not carefully, but deliberately, and tore it in half, then in quarters, then in eighths. She crushed the pieces in her fist, walked back inside, and threw them into the fireplace without ceremony. The flames caught fast. The paper crackled, twisted, and vanished into ash. She watched until it was gone. Then she moved to the fridge, pulled out a notepad, and began listing names again. She needed more pie pans, more chairs. She'd forgotten to plan a coat rack system. Mr. Clyde would need wheelchair access, and someone should bring allergy-safe options for the kids. She scribbled faster, lips pressed into a line. Let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them send their anonymous warnings and ugly little threats. She'd been invisible for so long they'd mistaken her silence for weakness. That was their first mistake. And it would not be their last. The first folding table groaned under its own weight as Evelyn dragged it open in the center of the community hall. The metal legs clanged against the scuffed hardwood. Dust puffed up from years of disuse, dancing in the shafts of morning light pouring through the windows. She paused for a breath, part fatigue, part awe, and looked around. The room still felt like a cavern. But now it was hers. A blank canvas, a sanctuary in waiting. She reached for another table, then another. By the time she had 4 open, sweat dotted her temples, and the ache in her lower back reminded her she wasn't 20 anymore. But the pain came with purpose. She welcomed it. At 10 hours sharp, the first volunteer arrived, a teenage girl in a tie-dye hoodie, earbuds hanging from her neck. Her name was Bree. She offered a soft smile and immediately began unfolding chairs without a word. Then came Mrs. Darlene, cheeks flushed from walking, carrying a plastic tub of artificial leaves and cinnamon sticks. "I used to decorate the school stage every fall," she said proudly. "Still remember how to make a table sparkle." By noon, 10 people were inside, then 15. The quiet of the hall dissolved into soft chatter, shuffling feet, the rustle of paper tablecloths, and the crinkling of old storage bins opening like treasure chests, cloth napkins, plastic pumpkins, strands of twinkling lights, jars filled with buttons and dried beans. Evelyn stood off to the side, watching. A group of children practiced "This land is your land" at the far end of the room. A boy with a cowlick held a recorder too tightly. A girl in oversized corduroy pants kept starting the first verse too early. But they sang with such earnest it didn't matter. It was imperfect, homemade, unrehearsed. It was beautiful. She turned toward the kitchen pass-through window and jotted down more notes on her clipboard. Bree was now working alongside Mr. Clyde, who'd been dropped off early with a tray of sweet potatoes and a Bluetooth speaker he didn't know how to turn down. Evelyn helped him lower the volume, and he winked. "Gonna be the best damn Thanksgiving I ever had." Outside, the afternoon sun was lowering over the parking lot as Evelyn took a break to load tablecloths into her car. As she shut the trunk, she caught voices near the sidewalk. Familiar ones. "I swear to God, she's out here pretending to be the second coming of Julia Child." Madison. Evelyn didn't move. She stayed half-hidden behind her open car door, breath held. "She's got half the town wrapped around her like she's hosting the Met Gala," Madison continued, her voice sharp, fast, meant to be overheard. "It's pathetic, and they're all just falling for it." A second voice, another woman, hesitant. "I mean, at least she's doing something nice, right?" Madison snorted. "Please, it's performance, like everything with her. You give a lonely old woman a spotlight and suddenly she thinks she's a damn saint." Evelyn waited. The footsteps faded, and then, unexpectedly, she smiled. Not a bitter smile, not even tired, something steadier. If they were mocking her, it meant they were watching. If they were watching, it meant she was no longer invisible. She walked back into the hall. Cheeks flushed with cold, heart beating not with rage, but with rhythm. Helen spotted her and waved from across the room. Evelyn waved back, then picked up a basket of place cards and began setting them out one by one. Names she'd once read on scraps of paper, now written in calligraphy by a retired art teacher who hadn't seen her daughter in 7 years. Darlene, Clyde, Penny, Tom, Mavis, Hector, each one getting a seat, each one being seen. She'd just placed the last card on the main table when she felt a tap on her shoulder. A woman in a camel coat stood there, pen behind one ear, notepad in hand. "You're Evelyn Carter, right?" she asked. "I am. I'm Rachel Hill with the Halberton Gazette. Mind if I ask you a few questions? I heard about what you're doing here. Sounds like something the whole town should know." Evelyn blinked once, then nodded. "Sure," she said. "Let's talk." The reporter, Rachel Hill, was younger than Evelyn had expected. Late 20s, maybe. No makeup, hair tied in a messy bun, and a notepad filled with half-legible scribbles. But her questions were direct, respectful. "How many guests are you expecting?" "More than I ever thought," Evelyn said. "But still not enough." Rachel smiled. "And why do this?" Evelyn looked around the dining hall, at the paper garlands being strung up by giggling teenagers, at the kitchen bustle, the sound of someone tuning a violin off-key in the corner. "Because everyone deserves to belong somewhere on Thanksgiving," she said simply, "even the ones the world forgets." The next morning, Evelyn woke early, earlier than usual, not to shop or stir or prep stuffing, but because her phone would not stop buzzing. Calls, voicemails, emails. Dings and pings and blinking notifications from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Helen arrived with a box of name tags and a look of disbelief. "You're on the front page," she said, holding up the Halberton Gazette like it was evidence in a trial. There, just below the masthead, was a photo. Evelyn standing in the hall beneath a string of twinkle lights, clipboard in hand, tables being arranged behind her like a coronation. One woman's table, Evelyn Carter's Thanksgiving for the Forgotten. "I don't look awful," Evelyn murmured, squinting. "You look like the town's new queen," Helen replied, dropping the box with a thud. By noon, the RSVP list had doubled. By 3, it had tripled. By the next morning, she'd run out of chairs. Volunteers she'd never met showed up with trays of food, fresh linens, hand-knit scarves, even a box of board games for the kids. Someone donated a commercial coffee maker. Another brought live poinsettias. A retired DJ offered to run music. It was becoming more than dinner. It was a movement. Jason Carter first heard about it when a coworker slid the newspaper across his desk with a smirk. "Your mom's famous." Jason forced a laugh, but something cold bloomed in his gut. He scanned the headline, then the photo, then the quote. "Family isn't just blood, it's who shows up." He stood so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the filing cabinet. By the time he reached Evelyn's house, she was outside watering the front steps. The irony of it, preparing for guests she wasn't expecting, didn't escape him. "Ma." She didn't look up. "Jason. We need to talk." She set the watering can down and faced him fully. Calm. Solid. Not defensive. Not apologetic. "Go ahead." He held up the paper. "What the hell is this?" "A dinner," she said. "A table. Chairs. People. Joy. You're embarrassing us." Evelyn tilted her head. "Who's us exactly?" Jason hesitated. "Me. Madison. The family." "I had a family," she said, voice still even. "But they told me I didn't deserve a seat." Jason opened his mouth, but she cut him off. "I spent 3 decades building bridges no one walked across. I'm done asking to be seen." His face flushed. "So this is revenge?" She shook her head. "No. This is healing." "You need to cancel it," he snapped, "before this whole thing turns into a circus." Evelyn stepped forward, her eyes locked on his. "It already is a circus, Jason. The difference is, now I'm not the clown in the corner hoping someone throws peanuts." The words stunned him into silence. She picked up the watering can again. You should go. He did, but not before turning back once and seeing her laugh, really laugh, with two volunteers unloading pies from the back of a van. That night, Madison paced their kitchen like a campaign manager in crisis. She's hijacking the narrative. Jason sat at the counter, still in his work shirt, scrolling through Facebook comments. People are calling her a saint, a town hero. There's even talk of nominating her for some kind of local leadership award. It's getting out of control. She shut me down, he muttered. Madison stopped pacing. We need to shut her down. Jason looked up slowly. How? Madison's eyes narrowed. She's not running a charity. There's got to be a legal angle. Liability, permits, health codes, anything we can use to make this look irresponsible. Jason hesitated. I don't know if I can. She's making us look cruel, Jason. Weak. If she wins this, she owns the family name. Jason looked down at his phone again, at Evelyn's face on the paper. The quote. The smile. Then he nodded once. Okay. The knock wasn't polite. It was sharp and fast. Like someone trying to stake a claim. Evelyn wiped her hands on a dish towel and opened the door to find Jason and Madison on her porch. Madison's coat was unbuttoned, her lipstick too red for the pale November sun. Jason stood half a step behind her, jaw clenched. You're not answering your phone, Madison said without a greeting. I've been busy, Evelyn replied evenly. There's a lot to do. Madison let her eyes drift over Evelyn's small living room, the stacks of canned goods, the labeled boxes of decorations, the guest lists taped to the wall. So this is the command center for your little charity circus. Evelyn's hand tightened on the edge of the doorframe, but she didn't flinch. It's a dinner, she said, for people who need one. It's a spectacle, Madison snapped. You're embarrassing us. People are talking like you're some kind of saint, but all you're doing is dragging our name through the mud. Our name? Evelyn echoed. I don't remember you ever carrying it. Jason stepped forward, his face pink. Ma, can we please go inside? We're not here to fight. You're on my porch, she said. If you want to speak, speak. Madison rolled her eyes. Fine. You've made your point. You were upset about Thanksgiving, and we're sorry, okay? But this mass feeding thing, it's reckless. You don't have permits. You don't have staff. And when someone gets sick, it's going to be on you. I have volunteers, Evelyn said calmly. I have safety protocols. And I have a community that wants to be seen. Jason's voice cracked. You're not listening. We're trying to protect you from yourself. No, Evelyn said softly. You're trying to protect yourselves from me. That stopped them. Madison's mouth opened, then closed again. Jason looked away, his hands fisting and unfisting at his sides. You don't know what you're doing, Madison said finally, her tone dipped in sugar but sharp as glass. This isn't just some bake sale at the PTA. You're playing with fire. I know exactly what I'm doing, Evelyn replied. For once. Jason's shoulders tensed. Cancel it, he said. No. His voice rose. Cancel it, Ma. She held his gaze, unshaken. Go home, Jason. For a moment, he looked like a boy again, standing in the kitchen after breaking a window with a baseball, waiting for her to scold him. But this time she didn't. He turned on his heel, muttering something under his breath. Madison lingered a moment longer, giving Evelyn a look that was equal parts pity and promise. You'll regret this, she said. Then she followed Jason down the steps. Evelyn closed the door with deliberate slowness. She stood there for a long time, her palm flat against the wood. Only when she was sure their car had gone did she let herself exhale. Her hands were shaking. She went back to the kitchen, stirred the pot on the stove as if nothing had happened, and told herself she wasn't rattled. Not really. not enough to stop. That night, the sound woke her. A dull crack. Then another. The unmistakable splinter of glass. She shot upright in bed, heart hammering. Out the window, the street was empty, except for a dark shape retreating down the sidewalk. She couldn't tell if it was a person or a shadow. Her porch light flicked on automatically. She ran outside barefoot. Her car windshield was a spider web of fractured glass, shards glittering on the driveway like frost. A rock lay on the hood, streaked with mud. For a long moment she just stared at it. The cold air biting her arms, her breath coming in sharp clouds. Then she picked up the rock. It was heavy, solid, warm from whatever hand had thrown it. She set it on the hood like a paperweight and walked back inside. In the living room, the guest list was still pinned to the wall. She touched it with her fingertips, tracing the names, one by one. When she reached the last, she straightened her spine. They could break glass, they could break silence, but they would not break her table. The officer stood at the edge of Evelyn's driveway, pen barely touching the notepad he wasn't really using. "Probably just kids," he said, nodding toward the smashed windshield. "We've had a couple of reports lately. Halloween leftover antics." Evelyn said nothing, just hugged her sweater tighter around her body. "You didn't see anyone?" he asked. "No." "No cameras?" "No." He gave a sympathetic shrug that meant nothing. "File a report at the station if you want. Insurance'll need it." She nodded once. He left before she could change her mind. Inside the house, Evelyn sat at the kitchen table and stared at the rock still sitting on the counter. The one she hadn't thrown away. The one that still held the imprint of someone's anger. For the first time since this whole thing began, the room felt too quiet. No volunteers bustling, no playlist humming through the Bluetooth speaker. Just the sound of the fridge cycling and the faint creak of the wind in the eaves. The weight pressed on her chest like a skillet. She looked at her hands, dry, cracked at the knuckles from all the cleaning, the chopping, the folding. Her to-do list sat in front of her, ink bleeding at the corners where her coffee had spilled the night before, and suddenly she felt it, the tired, not the physical kind, something deeper. The kind that sinks into your bones when you realize how much you've taken on and how alone you really are. She dropped her head into her hands and let it come. Quiet, hot tears pooling at the base of her palms. She didn't sob. She didn't moan. She just let it flow like something old had cracked open inside her. There was a knock. This one was gentle. She didn't move. "Evelyn?" Helen's voice came through the door, tentative. "You home?" A moment later, the door creaked open. Helen stepped into the kitchen, took one look at Evelyn, and didn't say a word. She just pulled out a chair, sat down beside her, and placed a thermos on the table. "Chamomile," she said softly. "With honey." Evelyn didn't lift her head. "I think I made a mistake." "You didn't." "I don't know if I can pull it off. The health permits, the food, the music, the chairs. I'm holding it all together with duct tape and prayer." Helen reached over and placed her hand on Evelyn's back. "It's not all on you anymore." Evelyn lifted her head slightly, eyes red. "What if I let them down? What if I've promised something I can't deliver?" Helen's voice was firm. "Then we pivot. We adjust. We show up anyway. You've already delivered more than they've had in years." They sat like that for a while, steam rising gently from the forgotten thermos. Then came another knock, and another. Not loud, not urgent, but consistent. Evelyn opened the door to find Tom and Mavis standing outside, arms full of mismatched table runners and a crock pot. "We thought we'd help early," Mavis said. "Didn't want to sit around waiting for Thursday." Behind them, Bree stepped out of her mom's car with a box of votive candles and her backpack slung over one shoulder. She waved awkwardly. I finished the playlist. No Taylor Swift, I swear. Mr. Clyde rolled up next, his walker clattering as he made his way up the steps with a folder of printouts. I laminated name cards. Hope that's not too much. Evelyn stood frozen in the doorway. They just kept coming. No fanfare. No big speeches. Just hands carrying food, decorations, sheet music, thermoses, folding chairs, stacks of paper snowflakes, extension cords. Helen squeezed her arm. Told you. Evelyn swallowed back the lump in her throat and stepped aside. Come on in, she said, voice shaking only slightly. We've got work to do. They filled the living room, the kitchen, the hallway. The quiet was replaced with low laughter, the smell of lentil soup, the soft hum of togetherness. Evelyn looked at the guest list again. It wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to all of them. The dining hall glowed. Strands of soft white lights looped across the exposed beams like stars caught in a net. Tables stood dressed in mismatched linens and thrifted centerpieces. Some elegant, some simple, all honest. Handmade place cards curled gently at the corners, nestled beside polished silverware and folded napkins tied with sprigs of rosemary. Evelyn stood near the entrance, hands clasped loosely in front of her, watching it unfold. Tom adjusted the chairs for the 5th time, muttering to himself about symmetry. Bree balanced on a step stool, stringing the last of the paper snowflakes. In the corner, Penny and another foster teen practiced a duet on cello and keyboard, stopping occasionally to whisper corrections and giggle at missed notes. The soft swell of their music spilled out over the sound of bubbling pots and clinking trays from the kitchen. The scent of roasted garlic and cinnamon clung to the air. It was, Evelyn thought, something close to sacred. She made her way slowly down the center aisle, running her fingers along the backs of chairs, nodding at the final seating chart tacked beside the kitchen door. She paused to accept a slice of pecan pie from Mrs. Darlene, who insisted she taste test like a real general. Evelyn took one bite. War's already won. Laughter erupted from a nearby group folding napkins. She moved from table to table, offering quiet encouragement, her clipboard forgotten in her back pocket. For the first time in days, she didn't feel like she had to direct every moment. The machine moved on its own now, fueled by shared joy and a kind of quiet, scrappy pride. On the other side of town, the Carter household buzzed with a very different kind of energy. Madison paced the kitchen in Louboutin Flats, barking orders into her Bluetooth headset. The caterers had just delivered the wrong table runners. Champagne, not ivory. And Jason was upstairs trying to convince a family friend to DJ, despite his clear lack of interest. The rented chafing dishes gleamed beneath the overhead track lights. A 12-foot dining table had been brought in specifically for the occasion, even though the guest list barely scraped 20. Madison turned to Jason as he descended the stairs. We have to make this perfect. He nodded, distracted, adjusting the cuff of his monogrammed shirt. I told the florist to redo the centerpiece. Good, she said, almost to herself. This needs to scream elegance, not homemade charity stunt. Jason poured himself a drink. She'll be forgotten by Monday. Madison smiled coldly. She'll be a footnote. We'll show everyone what real Thanksgiving looks like. He clinked his glass against hers. Neither of them noticed how forced the toast felt. Back at the community center, Evelyn stepped outside for air. The night was crisp but not cruel. The street was quiet, the sky washed with stars. She wrapped her arms around herself and leaned against the cool brick of the building, letting her breath fog and vanish into the dark. Helen joined her a moment later, holding 2 mugs of cider. I heard Madison booked a private chef, she said, handing over a mug, and a string quartet. Evelyn chuckled. Did she get a fog machine too? They're calling it the Carter Thanksgiving Soiree. Evelyn shook her head, smiling faintly. Let them. We've got Tom and Bree's playlist and a jello mold shaped like a turkey. I like our odds. Helen raised her mug in a mock toast. To our odds. They sipped in silence. Evelyn's smile faded slowly as she stared up at the sliver of moon. I keep thinking I forgot something, she said. You didn't. I keep waiting for someone to stop this. Say it's too much, too ambitious, too impossible. Helen looked at her. It's already happening. Evelyn nodded once. Then I guess I have to stop bracing for the crash. Easier said than done. Maybe, she said. But they're coming. All of them. And I want to meet them whole. Not bitter. Not afraid. Helen squeezed her shoulder. Then rest tonight. You've earned it. Evelyn didn't say anything right away. Her eyes traced the windows of the glowing hall behind her. Laughter filtered out, the sound of chairs dragging into place, a single, sweet piano note. Then she whispered, more to herself than anyone, tomorrow, we sit. Thanksgiving morning broke in golden silence, the kind of quiet that comes before something sacred. Not the hushed tension of fear, but the soft pause of reverence, like the world itself knew what was coming. By 9:30 a.m., the parking lot of the Halberton Community Center was half full. By 10:15, the line snaked down the sidewalk. Children in oversized coats bounced in place while elderly guests huddled under knit scarves and passed thermoses between them. Inside, the dining hall glowed brighter than it had even the night before. The scent of roasted turkey, cinnamon, cloves, and something sweet and unfamiliar, possibly Darlene's experimental cranberry chutney, blended into a perfume of comfort. Evelyn stood just inside the entrance, greeting each arrival by name or with a warm guess if the face was new. Welcome, Mr. Clyde. Come on in. Your seat's just past the piano. Oh my, Penny, your curls look beautiful today. Ricky, is that your uncle? Wonderful. We'll find him a chair. She wore a soft burgundy cardigan, pearls just for the occasion, and a smile that didn't fade, not even once. Tom played host at the beverage station like he was born for it, holding court over cider, cocoa, and the suspiciously strong punch someone had smuggled in. Helen and Bree floated between tables, adjusting centerpieces and handing out second helpings before the first bites were even finished. Music drifted in and out, violin, cello, laughter louder than it had any right to be. Evelyn paused at one point in the center of the room, just long enough to take it all in. There were no power suits here, no monogrammed place cards, no white tablecloths that couldn't survive a gravy spill. Just honest warmth. People who had once been names on lonely bulletin boards, now folded into a tapestry that was still stitching itself. She looked like a woman at peace, which is exactly when Jason and Madison arrived. The doors opened behind her and Evelyn turned, not with dread, but with a kind of quiet curiosity, like a teacher wondering if a student had finally shown up for class. Jason stood just inside the threshold, stiff in a gray cashmere coat. Madison, behind him, wore heels too tall for the old linoleum floors and a frozen smile that cracked at the corners. They had expected to find a modest crowd. What they saw was a movement. Over 100 people. Packed tables. Roaring laughter. A child leaning over to feed stuffing to an elderly woman who wasn't even his grandmother. Guests who looked like they'd known each other for years, though many had met only hours ago. Jason opened his mouth, but no one noticed. Madison touched his arm. "Let's just go," she whispered, but he stepped forward toward Evelyn. She didn't move, didn't smile, didn't frown. A flash went off. Rachel, the reporter from the Halberton Gazette, snapped a photo. Evelyn standing at the center of the scene, tables behind her, families gathered, music swelling. Jason reached her, eyes tight. "Ma." He waited. Another flash went off. But Evelyn didn't flinch. She tilted her head. Yes? This is a lot. It is. Why didn't you tell me it had gotten this big? She looked around the room like she hadn't even considered it. It didn't feel like mine to tell anymore. Jason swallowed. We're having dinner at home later. Madison and me. We've got... She raised a hand, not unkindly. Jason. He stopped. I'm sure it'll be lovely, she said. But this... She gestured to the laughter, the plates clinking, the music, the joy. This is my family now. He opened his mouth again, but someone bumped into him with a tray of rolls and mumbled a distracted, "Excuse me." The moment passed. Evelyn turned. She walked back toward the center table, where Penny had saved her a seat with a handmade place card. Evelyn, the heart of the hall. She sat. Someone poured her cider. Someone else passed her a dish of green beans. And somewhere near the door, Jason stood frozen, watching her laugh. Not at him, or for him, but without him. For the first time, he understood something that Madison couldn't. She didn't need them anymore, and she wasn't coming back. By Friday morning, the town was talking, not in whispers anymore, not behind closed blinds or under breath in grocery store aisles. Loudly, proudly. The Halberton Gazette printed a follow-up with a full-page photo of Evelyn seated beneath a string of snowflakes. Children gathered around her, laughter frozen mid-frame like a living Norman Rockwell. By noon, a local blogger picked it up, the table that healed a town. By Saturday, the post had gone semi-viral, shared by community groups in 3 neighboring counties. Facebook feeds filled with candid photos. Tom pouring cider like a sommelier, Penny's duet mid-performance, Mr. Clyde dancing with a toddler in a dinosaur costume. People posted their gratitude in long, winding threads. My first real Thanksgiving in 10 years. I didn't know anyone at my table, but by dessert, we were family. Evelyn Carter, whoever you are, thank you, the mayor commented. So did the head librarian, the old-school nurse, and even the town's beloved weatherman, who simply wrote, "We need more ECs in this world." Meanwhile, Jason Carter stood in line at the hardware store, holding a receipt for return. He didn't make eye contact. Neither did the cashier. She scanned his item. Unused twinkle lights from his and Madison's own dinner, barely attended, and gave him a thin smile. "Big turnout last night, huh?" she said, too casually. Jason didn't answer. Someone behind him cleared their throat, sharp, intentional. He felt it like a stone pressed into his spine. Not hatred, worse, disappointment. At the cafe, Madison tried to place a catering order for her boutique's holiday mixer and was told they were fully booked through New Year's. She stared at the manager, incredulous. "We've never been turned down," she hissed as they walked out. "This is a joke." Jason held the door without speaking. "No one cares about matching napkins and shrimp skewers when they've got Evelyn playing Mother Teresa with crock pots," she snapped. "You should have shut this down when I told you to." Jason kept his gaze forward. His voice came out quiet. "You're the one who said we needed to crush her. And you let her win." He flinched. Not because she was wrong, but because deep down, he knew she wasn't the only one who'd failed. The next morning at church, the Carters sat 2 pews behind where they used to. Madison insisted it was for the lighting. When the pastor asked the congregation to thank the hands and hearts that made this week feel whole, a wave of applause rose, unprompted. Half the room turned to look at Evelyn, seated alone but smiling, 2 guests from the banquet flanking her in pews they'd never dared enter before. Madison stood to leave before the final hymn. Jason stayed sitting. Back on her front porch, Evelyn Carter rocked gently in a weather-worn chair, a crocheted blanket folded across her knees. A mug of ginger tea steamed in her hands, untouched. Her house was quiet again. No more trays to warm, No more name tags to arrange. The fridge hummed steadily, full of leftovers dropped off by guests who now texted her like old friends. She didn't turn on the TV, didn't check her phone. She just rocked. Her eyes drifted across the yard, where leaves had started to drift over the sidewalk. Where, days ago, her windshield had been shattered in the dark. The glass had been swept. The rock had been thrown away. But the memory remained. And so did the peace. The door creaked behind her. Helen stepped out, handing over a folded newspaper with a grin. "Front page again," she said. "This time they called you a pillar of resilience." "That's a new one." Evelyn chuckled softly. "I liked matriarch better." Helen sat beside her. "So, what now?" Evelyn looked at the yard, the porch, the empty plate left beside her tea. "Now," she said slowly, "we keep building." Helen nodded, watching her friend sip at last. But just before the sun dipped behind the trees, a car rolled past. Jason's. He didn't stop, didn't wave. But Evelyn saw the way he looked, like someone passing a house they used to live in, one they hadn't realized was no longer theirs. She didn't rise. She didn't smile. She simply rocked forward once, slow and steady, her hands wrapped around her mug like something too warm to let go. The ivory napkins had been pressed. The champagne was chilled. The playlist had been curated down to the second, starting with Sinatra and ending with a string quartet cover of "What a Wonderful World." But the dining room was mostly empty. Jason stood near the window, holding a crystal tumbler of untouched bourbon, watching the driveway as the minutes ticked by. It was nearly 6 p.m., 30 minutes past their stated dinner time, and only 5 guests had arrived. All of them were people Madison had guilted into coming. A junior associate from Jason's firm, 2 of her boutique clients, and an elderly couple who brought their own wine and asked repeatedly how long they had to stay. The roast sat untouched beneath its silver cover. The candles flickered without warmth. The room, despite its flawless staging, felt hollow. "Don't hover by the window," Madison hissed from the kitchen, adjusting her lipstick in the reflection of the microwave. "You look desperate." Jason didn't answer. She stormed back into the dining room, heels clicking with too much force for the polished floors. "You sent the wrong time on the RSVP, didn't you? This is why no one's here." "They're not coming," Jason said quietly, still staring out. "Excuse me." They went to hers. Madison blinked. "Who?" "You know who." She scoffed. "Oh, please. A couple of casseroles and some folding chairs?" That was a charity stunt, not a holiday. Jason didn't respond. She turned, arms crossed, scanning the room like she could will it full. "Where's the press? Where's the damn photographer I hired?" "Cancelled," he muttered. "What?" He looked at her then, his voice dry. "Said there wasn't enough of a visual story." For a moment, Madison looked like someone who'd been slapped. Then she turned away, muttering, "This town has no taste." The next day, things got worse. Photos from Evelyn's banquet were everywhere, on the town's Facebook group, in the Gazette, even in a special email blast from the mayor's office thanking a private citizen who reminded us what Thanksgiving should look like. Jason walked into his office Monday morning and found his inbox full of cheery subject lines. "Your mom's amazing. Wish I'd known about the real party. Next year, bring your dish to Evelyn's." He sat down, shoulders heavy, and didn't open a single one. That evening, at home, Madison stormed through the front hallway, tearing open a letter from the event planner they'd hired for their boutique's winter launch. "They're pulling out," she shouted. "Said they're refocusing on community engagement and don't want to seem out of touch." Jason didn't look up from the sink, where he was rinsing out the roasting pan no one had eaten from. "And now everyone's canceling their RSVPs for the boutique event," she continued. "We spent $5,000 on lighting, 5 grand. And for what? To be publicly humiliated by a woman who thinks canned cranberry sauce is high cuisine? She slammed the letter on the counter. This is your fault. He turned. Mine? Yes. You were supposed to stop her. You were supposed to fix it before she made us look like the villains. Jason stared at her, something finally cracking. Not loud, but definite. Maybe she didn't make us look like anything. Madison froze. What's that supposed to mean? He set the pan on the drying rack, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Maybe we did that on our own. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. He walked past her, slow and deliberate. I'm going to bed. 2 blocks away, Evelyn sat with Helen on her porch swing, sipping cider beneath a blanket of stars. The warmth of the banquet still lingered in her bones, like music that refused to fade. Helen tucked her feet up. Did you hear about Madison's soiree? I heard it didn't soar, Evelyn said, smiling faintly. They say she spent enough to cater a wedding. Evelyn didn't comment, just watched a single leaf twist in the breeze before landing softly on the porch railing. Do you feel bad? Helen asked gently. Evelyn turned to her, eyes calm. About people choosing joy? No, about what it cost them. Evelyn looked out over her dark yard. We all choose what to invest in. They chose Polish. I chose people. She sipped her cider. Only one of those compounds. The parking lot was full before noon. The signs had gone up weeks earlier, hand-painted, not printed, on bulletin boards, in shop windows, and taped to telephone poles like invitations to something sacred. No RSVP required. Just show up hungry. For food. For belonging. For a seat. The Halberton Community Center had outgrown itself. This year they'd moved to the town's old armory building, cleared out and donated by the city after Evelyn's banquet had officially been recognized as a civic tradition. The vaulted ceiling was draped in string lights again, though now they were professionally rigged. Long tables filled the space like rows of crops, each blooming with mismatched dishes, fall leaves, and hand-scrawled place cards. Someone had embroidered "Everyone belongs here" across the cloth banner hung above the stage. Evelyn stood at the edge of it all, hands clasped gently in front of her, pearls fastened just so. She was no longer directing every detail. She didn't need to. Tom ran logistics like a field marshal. Bree had gone off to college but came back just for the event, now in charge of music and opening remarks. Mr. Clyde, cane in hand, held a clipboard and pointed people to their seats like a maitre d'. There were new faces, too, dozens of them. Volunteers Evelyn hadn't met yet, but who knew her name before she ever said it. The smell of rosemary rolls, roasted turkey, sweet potato pie, and spiced cider moved through the air like a song you never forgot. A girl tugged at Evelyn's sleeve, Penny's niece maybe, and handed her a drawing of the table shaped like a giant heart. Evelyn thanked her, then tucked it into her cardigan pocket. Ms. Carter, someone called from behind. We're ready to open the doors. She nodded and turned toward the entrance. Flanked by Helen and a few other early guests. Her steps were slower this year, but not weaker. They held weight now. She had become something in this town, anchor, legend, lighthouse. The doors opened. People poured in. Strangers, friends, strangers who'd become friends. One woman brought her newborn wrapped in a blanket stitched by last year's volunteers. 2 older men clasped hands as they found their table, laughing like brothers. A high school boy wore a makeshift Team Evelyn button on his jacket. The room filled fast, and Evelyn let herself watch. No clipboard, no anxiety, just pride. She made her way to her seat at the head of the longest table, the one with the paper centerpiece that read, "Found Family." She eased into her chair, sighing quietly, as if releasing the last ounce of burden she hadn't realized she still carried. That's when she saw him, Jason, standing just inside the doorway, alone. He wore a plain coat this time. No sharp lines, no performative confidence. Just him. Older, quieter. A little smaller than she remembered. His hands were in his pockets, unsure of whether to move forward. No Madison. Evelyn watched him approach. Each step looked like it took effort, not because of distance, but because of what it meant. When he reached her, he didn't speak at first. Just took off his coat and held it in front of him like a boy sent to apologize for something he couldn't quite name. "I wasn't sure if I could come," he said. Evelyn raised her brows slightly. "But I wanted to," he added quickly. "Not to take anything, just to be here." He looked around at the crowded tables, the sound of shared stories and second helpings. "You made something real," he said, his voice cracking. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded toward the empty seat beside her, not at the head of the table, but close. "You can sit," she said, "if you're here to be part of it. Not to fix it. Not to lead it. Just to listen." Jason hesitated, then sat, folding his hands in his lap like a guest and not a son. A plate was placed in front of him. Someone poured cider. No one stared. No one whispered. It was just another chair filled. Evelyn turned back toward the room. She felt it rise in her chest. The warmth, the weight, the simple, sacred knowledge that she had built something lasting. Not to prove a point. Not to win. But because people had needed it and she had given it freely. Across from her, Tom raised a toast. "To Evelyn," he said. "Our heart, our home, our seat at the table." The room echoed with clinking glasses. Evelyn smiled, her eyes misting, not from pain, but from peace. And as laughter and music carried on into the afternoon, she knew. What had once been stolen from her had not only been reclaimed, it had been reborn.